I am Alexa Brown. I'm with the Grays Harbor Stream Team. If you aren't familiar with the Stream Team, we do volunteer projects within the community. So we do invasive species removals. We do stream cleanups within the city of Aberdeen and partner with the city of Aberdeen on those cleanups. And we also do tree plantings in our riparian areas, or those areas next to our stream. We also get out into our schools and educate our youth about the salmon life cycle and about macroinvertebrates and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. So that's the Stream Team. If you haven't met me or been at any of our volunteer events. And we have Lee first here this evening. I just kind of want to give her a shout out because she works with Twin Harbors Waterkeeper as well as I. And I just wanted to just let you know that she's here. So if you have any questions for Twin Harbors Waterkeeper, you want to get a hold of her. She does a lot of work on our toxic cleanup sites within the city of Aberdeen, and is working towards community education outreach in that area. So if you have any questions about that sort of stuff, we're operating on a public participation grant from the Department of Ecology to do that outreach about toxic cleanup sites. I would just want to also mention that that the Grays Harbor Stream Team is partnering with the city of Aberdeen for this talk, and they have provided a lot of our funding to do the stormwater education. So I give a good shout out to them. And Jess is fine with you asking questions throughout her talk, as long as the slides up is easiest to ask then. But if you have more general questions, you can save those for the end, and you can put them in the chat if you don't want to try to hold on to that question throughout the talk. So go ahead and put any general questions that you'd like to ask towards the end in there, and feel free to raise your hand or just shout out a question if you have it as she's presenting. So with that, we can get started. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jess, and you can go ahead and share your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I was mentioning to Alexa, I am a construction stormwater inspector with the Department of Ecology. I work with the Southwest Regional Office, and I typically cover Pierce and Jefferson counties, but sometimes there's some overlap between me and some of my fellow inspectors. I'll start sharing and make sure everything is working right. Get rid of this. I'm gonna stop my video while I go through this as well. Get rid of that. And then let's see. Anyone know how I get rid of this one? Okay, I don't think it'll be in the way, but if anybody knows how to get rid of this one, just let me know. All right, so yes, I'm an inspector. I've been doing it for about 2 years. Prior to that, I worked as a permit administrator for the Department of Ecology, working on the construction and industrial stormwater general permits. And then before that, did very similar work with the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, administering permits, reviewing construction plans, stormwater plans, and inspecting sites. So some of the topics we'll talk about that you saw in the flyer. So activities that actually require a construction stormwater general permit. We'll look at some best management practices, BMPs for eliminating pollution. I will walk through a little bit of applying for a construction stormwater general permit. There is a slide that our Nonpoint source inspector actually helped me put together to go over some sources of Nonpoint pollution. And I also have her contact info in there as well. And then we'll look at how to report pollution. And I will also send this PowerPoint to Alexa to go along with the recording, because there are some links and different websites and things like that in here. Okay. Main question is, do I actually need a construction stormwater general permit? Kind of black and white answer is if you are disturbing an acre or more within, a complete project or a phased project and discharging to waters of the state, then you would need coverage under the construction stormwater general permit. If you're under an acre and determined to be a significant contributor of pollutants, we might also require you to get under coverage sites like, for example, that are contaminated or might discharge to impaired water bodies. And surface waters of the state, this permit or this definition is pulled directly from the permit. So it includes lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, inland waters, salt waters, and all other surface waters and water courses within the jurisdiction of the state of Washington. So pretty much anything, roadside ditches, wetlands, anything like that, ephemeral streams, intermittent streams, kind of any sort of water course that is in Washington. What we kind of look at when someone asks us if they need coverage is if it's going to discharge to a water of the state. The Water Quality Atlas, this can be found on Ecology's website, and I'll open this up and look at it a little bit with you guys. But this is where we start. I often work in Pierce County, so I recommend, if your local jurisdiction has additional GIS layers that you can access, those typically have a lot better information. You can get information on the actual stormwater infrastructure, so you can see where how water is actually moving throughout the area. And you'll also see a lot more local water bodies mapped out, so wetlands and other more kind of local water courses. But this is where we start, and I'll open this up and go through this a little bit. And you could just find this with like a simple Google search of WA Ecology Water Quality Atlas. But again, I'll include this, the PowerPoint with the links. So this is where I start. I'll add the water bodies. I add the assessed water bodies for the 303D listed waters.
We're still seeing your slide.
Oh, let's see.
You might have to stop sharing and then reshare.
Okay. Let's see.
I've had that issue before.
Yeah, I typically work in teams. So I'm getting still getting used to the Zoom. Is that working now? Do you see a map? Okay. Yep. So this is where I was adding the just the water bodies themselves. The assessed water. So this is those 303D listed water bodies, and then the water quality improvement project. So that'll be your TMDLs. And then go here and make sure you can actually see it. And so this is kind of where we'll start. Again, I will use those local GIS layers if I have any sort of questions or anything. When we're kind of determining whether or not a site requires a permit or maybe it's just recommended. We're looking at this sort of stuff, roadways, whether or not they have catch basins along them that can transport any sort of construction stormwater to a surface water body, as well as, pre-construction grades, during construction grades, and post-construction grades. So this is kind of where we're going to start when we determine whether or not a permit's needed. See, and I'll go back here. All right. So what's considered a discharge? Any sort of stormwater that's coming off of a site. So that can be, clean water, turbid water. And this photo here, it's the track out is going to be the main source of a discharge. So the site's fairly large, has pretty, well infiltrating soils. You can't see as quite a lot of track out coming off of the site here because there really is no construction access. And anytime it rains, that sediment's going to be washed down into a catch basin that does drain to a water of the state. So any sort of stormwater that's going to hit your exposed soils and come off of your site. And the benefit of having the permit, so it is a permit that's authorizing these discharges. We have a 25 NTU adaptive management parameter, as well as the 250 NTU benchmark or effluent limit. And those are in the permit, but you have kind of this, what we call adaptive management. So you have the ability with upsets and hopefully, proactively prior to any upsets, working with ecology to make sure you're in compliance with water quality standards and the construction stormwater general permit. Another question that I get asked often is whether or not a construction stormwater general permit from ecology is needed if a site has local stormwater permits. And the answer is yes. There is some overlap here. City of Aberdeen is not covered by an MS4 permit, as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pierce County is. A lot of my municipalities are working under an ecology issued permit that's going to dictate those local stormwater permits. However, they're mostly looking at post-construction stormwater infrastructure and permanent BMPs, whereas we're really focused on BMPs and stormwater management during the construction phase. And lastly, if you do have a question about whether a site requires a permit or if it's just recommended to get a permit, always ask your ecology inspector because they are going to have the ultimate say on that. And getting into some of the best management practices, so BMPs, the 2019 Stormwater Management Manual of Western Washington is the primary kind of BMP Bible. We work out of volume 2, and I'll click on this link in a moment and share that as well. But it's kind of organized. Volume 2 is organized by source control BMPs, so stabilized construction accesses, temporary and permanent seating, soil stabilization measures, nets, blankets, concrete washout areas, things like that. And then construction runoff BMP, so check dams, inlet protection, silt fence, as well as treatment. And I'll get into a little bit more specifics on treatment. And then kind of just my tidbit of advice is just to always be proactive rather than reactive on the sites. The kind of main things I see help a site stay in compliance throughout the winter is just minimizing exposed soils, establishing and maintaining stormwater conveyance, so having a way to get your stormwater from point A to point B across your site, and always having a backup plan. So don't have your stormwater pond or that last line of defense be your primary means of stormwater management. So I'll go here and make sure I shared this screen properly. Let me know if not, but it should be on the Stormwater Management Manual.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. So we're working out of the 2019 manual, volume 2. And then you can see over here kind of, let's see, construction stormwater BMPs, and then they're organized by source control and runoff BMPs. And you can go through here and kind of get really specifics on installation and maintenance specifications for a lot of the primary BMPs that you'll see and use on sites. And a lot of this stuff you would, folks would use to develop their stormwater pollution prevention plans, so their SWIPs. And we'll go into a little bit more on this. At the bottom here, the construction runoff BMPs, these are some really good ones to look at, kind of less commonly seen and used are the treatment methods. And again, I have a slide on that I'll get into a little bit. So just some photos here. This one is kind of the most commonly seen construction access. So nice large quarry spalls. Most of the soil around it is stabilized. The rocks are clean. Of course, this one's not being used. You can see it closed off at the end, but a good example of a construction access. This one in the middle is a fairly large slope up top. They're using rumble strips. They have quarry spalls going all the way up the road. And on really busy trucking days, they'll have a man washing tires up top on the slope, washing tires down here, actually maintaining the rumble strips so you don't get a bunch of turbid water pooling there. And then oftentimes there will be a couple of folks down here actually sweeping the road. And this one, the construction access, they're channelizing their stormwater off of it into a sump right about here that goes underneath the access road and is pumped into a sediment pond. This one here, they have, they're installing a fully contained wheel wash system. And you can see kind of the beginnings of a quarry spalled construction access road here. So some less good construction accesses. This one here is fairly stabilized just with the asphalt, but with that impervious surface, they have a lot of, they're just channelizing that turbid stormwater off of their site. So here, to start, the source of the turbid water was an uncovered stockpile. So stabilizing that stockpile and getting, plastic on it, berms around it, wattles around it to keep that turbid water from just discharging right off site. We'll also see folks use, berms and other sort of things to prevent that water from, or slow it down and let some of that sediment settle out before it discharges off site. This one is an example of one, let me go back. Clicking. This is during the dry season, but their primary reason for requiring the construction stormwater general permit is the track out. So the access is going to be their primary discharge point. No real access here. These soils do infiltrate well, but are mobilizing, and with any sort of water are going to go to the catch basin and discharge to a surface water body. This one is a photo of track out actually within the site. So this site actually has a bunch of catch basins along that roadway that go to a fairly small construction stormwater detention pond. So all of that water that's collecting on the roadway within the site is going to a stormwater pond. So kind of using that last line of defense is their primary means for containing their construction stormwater. When it gets full in early winter, they don't really have a place to put it. So just kind of another example of proactivity being your best friend, stabilizing any soils that you might have, any access points where equipment is coming on and off of exposed soils. Some photos of other BMPs. This is an example. They do have some, unstabilized soils here, but fairly good system that conveying the stormwater off of their access road into the sump and into their construction stormwater pond. This is a good example of a stabilized channel. They could potentially add a few more check dams in this channel, but the main goal is that stormwater going through this channel is going to get cleaner as it's moving through the system rather than dirty, as you would see in this example. So as stormwater, especially in high volumes like we've seen in the last couple of weeks, is just going to pick up more of that sediment and mobilize it rather than actually cleaning out as it's making its way through the system. Some examples of some not so great slope stabilization in a really good solid slope. So slopes, at this level are not going to, hay is not going to do the trick, especially again in the heavy greens that we see in Washington. That hay is just going to wash right down, start causing erosion on your slopes, and then eventually the slopes failing, which is what happened in this case. that the plastics, also not always the best BMP. The vegetation is really going to hold that slope together a lot better than plastic will. And it's, especially on a large site, it's a lot to maintain. There's a lot that can happen. Being implemented here, some good, some bad, and some kind of in between. So they're starting to kind of stabilize their site. This is definitely a site that is kind of in the reactive phase of things, or beginning of middle of a rainy season. So they start developing these channels here, berms, so that they can mobilize their water down the slope rather than it just rilling down the slopes that are failing. They're starting to use a bit more heavy duty stabilization here. So the mulch rather than just the plastic. And they've started, again, trying to stabilize some soils. This hasn't really, the hydroseed hasn't really taken yet in this photo, but stabilizing up above so that any sort of stormwater that's, coming down isn't chocolate milk. And these are some kind of photos of where you don't, want to find yourself. So at this point, there's not really much of anything that you can do aside from, finding a place to put that water, having it hauled off or treating it. And again, we'll go into the treatment a little bit further, but you want to be, again, just an example of being proactive at the beginning of winter. If you have, a pond this small, this turbid, this was actually an elementary school that was being built. So you can see the play field over here, but back behind me is just lots of disturbed soil from the school actually being built, and all of that stormwater going to this small pond that discharges to a wetland. So you don't want this, again, to be your last line of defense for stormwater management, because you're going to have to, in heavy rains, you're gonna have to figure out somewhere to put that water. And if it's this dirty, we wouldn't be able to discharge it. This site actually ended up using vegetation up here and some rather large pumps to get it over there and infiltrating in the vegetation. But continued to stabilize on site and implement those source control BMPs to get the site into compliance. So best management practices, the more or the less common ones. So treatment for pH, we see CO2 sparging, dry ice, and even cooking food grade vinegar being added. The pH is becoming more of kind of a highlight because we're starting to look more at groundwater quality standards and infiltration of high pH waters. And then we also have treatment for turbidity. So chemical treatment and filtration. The most common one that I see is the chitosan enhanced sand filtration. And if you have questions specifically about any sort of chitosan treatment, Ecology has a website, the TAPE website. And of course, there is a form. We are the government. So there's a form that you have to fill out for Ecology to approve your chemical treatment. And this goes to Doug Howie in our engineering department, and it's a pretty quick turnaround to have the form approved, much faster than actually getting the equipment out there on site and operational. So oftentimes it takes weeks to months to get this stuff out and have an operator on site. So again, being proactive about managing your site and the stormwater coming off of it. Let's see, so applying for coverage, I'll go through Secure Access Washington a little bit. I have a test account. We'll see kind of what information and documents you need to actually apply for coverage. Applying, we require 60 days, and we'll go through a little bit of that. That 60 days includes a 30-day public comment period, and then a 30-day period for your permit administrator to actually review the permit application and issue coverage. And I'll also show a little bit about the discharge monitoring reports. These are required monthly with the construction stormwater general permit, and those are submitted through the Secure Access Washington portal. So I'll just kind of show you where that is as well. Hope I can share this one correctly. All right. Hopefully you see Secure Access Washington. Let me know if not. A lot of folks will have these accounts. I know Ecology for our unemployment in the initial stages of COVID, this is where we went. So a lot of folks will already have a Secure Access Washington account, but if you don't, they're fairly easy to set up. This is, again, just a test account, so I can play around with things and not break anything. So if you were just starting out, you just created your account, signed in, you would go to add new service. All right, you could go different ways. I'd go, and typically I'll just do like Control F find for water quality portal. And there's like a YouTube video on Ecology's website, kind of walking you through this as well. You would add this one for the live. Again, I'm not going to break anything, so I go for the test saw account. I'll just go back home. Okay, so once you've added that service, access now, continue. And this is the water quality permitting portal. Here you can see applying for coverage, lots of different permits, so not just the construction stormwater general permit. There's also renewal links as well. And then I'll show you the DMRs too. This is the same place that you would submit those. To apply for coverage, construction stormwater general permit, you'd select new if you're applying for a new permit. To save everyone from having to watch me type things in, I'll just go to my existing NOIs. And I can edit from here. And then you just pretty much go through the tabs here. So it will require you to have a permittee, a site contact, and a site owner. You can add additional contacts if you like, but these three are required. Again, I've already kind of done this, so you didn't have to watch me go through everything. Let's see. Well, let's see. If you want to copy from site contact, I would go, you can go from your profile or one of your other ones that you've already put in. So copy from, so you don't have to fill all this information again. If the permittee, the site contact, and the site owner are all the same. So I'll say save contact, contact type. So that will be site owner, since it will require those three. Save contact. And this is kind of just basic information, organization name, mailing address, all that good stuff. And then I don't know about everyone else, but my mind, when I'm on this tab, I want to say save and continue. This might just be me, I'm not sure, but it'll come up with all of these violation messages. For me, I think there's a save and submit later button and the save and continue. I feel like I should have them change this to save and finish, because that's really what that's for. You're going to hit that at the very end to save and submit the application. I'm not sure why it says save and continue, but basically as you move through the tabs, it's going to save your information, so you don't have to hit this. Again, I've already kind of done this. So I've filled out most facility, site information, named it, whatever you want to name it, address, and then it'll pull up a map. Which is a pop-up, and you just select where on the map your facility actually is. Let's see. And then facility site. Okay, so I'm not gonna go there. Site project info. Here, highway, residential, total project size, disturbance, beginning, end, will 1,000 cubic yards or more of poured concrete or recycled concrete be used? This is for pH monitoring. If there is going to be 1,000 cubic yards or more, pH monitoring is required. If not, it would not be unless you are going to a pH impaired water body. And also ask them questions about contaminated soils or groundwater. If there are, there's going to be additional documents that are requested once you get this part of the application in. And then other permits, we have transfers, partial transfers, things like that. So if your permit's linked to another one, you can do that here as well. So discharge location, again, just kind of walking through the tabs. You can add an outfall. The outfall number is completely up to you, as you see up here. So I have 001, 002. As a permit administrator, I had folks sometimes ask me what to put here. This is totally, up to the naming system of, what makes sense to the user. So I had stormwater pond 32. We can say, I don't know if it doesn't come from a pond, just like sheet flow, outfall 1, something like that. The service water body, you would want to pull from the atlas or your local maps if it's more accurate. And then you'd save and go to a map, and it will have you pick your actual outfall on the map. And your outfall, when you pick that on the map, you'll want to make sure that it's actually on a surface water body, and you'll see those on the map. So just going through the tabs, you agree that you have a SWIP. You don't submit the SWIP with your application. That's something that's going to be required to have on site. I think some municipalities require a SWIP review prior to building your grading permits, things like that. But for ecology, you would just need to have that on site for your inspector to review when they actually inspect your site. So other kind of documents you need, DMRs, those are the discharge monitoring reports. You're agreeing to submit them. Those are due on the 15th of each month for the previous month's monitoring. And then SEPA, you would need, if you are exempt, you would need to provide documentation for the exemption. This can be, a formal letter, or it can be as informal as just an email from the lead agency. And so you'd fill that information out here. The public notice, so the system will generate one based on the information that you've put into the NOI. You can also upload your own public notice. However, just if you do that, ensure that all of the information actually matches the notice of intent application, as well as includes all of the information that's required in the public notice. And so it's published 1 week apart for 30 days. So I've added that in here. And then I would just say, or no, I would not save and continue. Sitemap, it would request me to upload that at the very end. And then questions. This is a really good little tab here. So you can get all of the documents that you need. I would recommend, if you're applying for a permit, just go ahead and save these different things in a folder. So a notice of termination for when you're done, you're gonna, every site's gonna fill that out. A modification or update form, not every site's gonna have that, but oftentimes you will. Permit fee, active status change form. So if your site is inactive for an extended period of time, you can actually freeze the fees. Transferring coverage, a common form that you'll need, and propose new discharge to an impaired water body. Your permit administrator would request this of you if you didn't realize that you were discharging to an impaired water body. But if you know that you do, that would be a good place to get that as well. And then you would save and continue. If I filled all of this out correctly, which just will be a bunch of pop-ups, it'll take you to a page with a signature form where the permittee would sign and submit that to ecology. Does anyone have any questions on that stuff?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in.
I'll just keep going here. So same place. This is where the discharge monitoring reports are submitted, the DMRs. So here you'd go to your permits. To submit the DMRs, there's another form, an electronic signature agreement form that will populate when you go in to submit DMRs. And that would go to Ecology. Tanya Wolf, another contact that you can find on Ecology's construction stormwater general permit page, and she would approve the electronic signature account to submit the discharge monitoring reports. So that's kind of portal applying and the DMRs. Where's the show? New share. Okay. All right, and then so non-point source pollution, kind of primary columns, fecal bacteria. So pet waste is a major contribution. So picking up pet waste, livestock waste, as well as human waste. For temperature, the main sources that they're seeing are removal of vegetative shade, as well as release of warmed irrigation water and sediments, so soils from tillage and livestock near streams, and livestock eroding stream banks near streams. And the non-point source contact for Grays Harbor County is Hannah Coe, and I'll email this out, but that is her phone number and email address. So reporting pollution, environmental report tracking system, ERTS. This was a photo of a site that I've used earlier. So the slope's failing, and discharging large amounts of turbid water here. So permit holders are required to report non-compliance within 24 hours via that ERTS system. And there's a call-in system as well as an online form that you can use. And I have the phone numbers on the next slide. That's typically the easiest and the fastest way to get it to the right people. Is just to call in the regional number to submit that ERTS. So how do you submit a report on behalf of yourself or others? So permittees are required. It's often, looked not pleasantly upon by inspectors to really be transparent and let us know when a site's having issues so that we can help. And so, a lot of times it'll be self-reported. If you see pollution and you need to report it, it's kind of the same process. There's an online form that anyone can fill out, as well as calling in those ERTS phone numbers. And so what happens after a report's submitted? So a whole slew of things can happen. It gets sent to the proper people, to the different agencies that might have jurisdiction there. So often Ecology will be involved, Fish and Wildlife might be involved. Depending on what the issue is, a construction stormwater inspector with Ecology will respond, or our spills department will respond, but kind of a real teamwork effort on responding to those ERTs. Oftentimes, if a self-reported ERTs, the site knows what's wrong and knows how to fix it, or can figure that out through a conversation and an inspection. And that's kind of what the response to that ERTs would be, is the stabilization of the slopes and all of the BMPs and adaptive management that was used to bring the site back into compliance. There are those 24-hour reporting numbers. The Southwest Regional Office is where you guys are mostly at. And then we also have some other regional office ERTS numbers as well. And again, a lot of this stuff is super easy to find. I'm typically just going into Google, typing in WA Ecology. You could probably just put in reporting numbers and take you straight to the page. And that is it. My contact here. Evan Wood is an inspector that just started with Ecology on October 1st. So he is still in training, but he will be in charge of Grays Harbor County. So his contact info is there as well. But we're still kind of a team effort at the moment as he makes his way through the training process. And that is all I have. If anybody has questions on that, any of that, let me know.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
I have three. The first one is, does Ecology work with municipalities to check to see that construction sites over 1 acre in size get covered under the permit?
We hope to and try to. I, again, mostly work in Pierce County, and I have a really good relationship with my Pierce County inspectors, city inspectors. And so most of the time, yes. I know from conversations with other inspectors in other counties and municipalities that it's not, you know, the education isn't always there. They don't always know when construction stormwater general permit's required. And I think that's definitely an area that, you know, could be improved as far as the local jurisdictions understanding the need for coverage and helping out those sites. So in Pierce County, I have, you know, 100 construction sites. So those relationships are super, super important in trying to get, you know, folks under coverage and into compliance. Did that answer the question? So we try to, not always. I think that's probably the most honest answer.
Yeah, I just met Evan, you know, well, I just talked to him on the phone because a couple days ago, I was in Chehalis during that amazing rain event. And I saw, you know, I've been looking at stormwater for 15 years, and I saw some of the worst stormwater I've ever seen down there. And so that was running off a permitted site. So my question about that is, does ecology expect permit holders to stabilize sites during large storm events like an atmospheric river?
Yes, and I've just recently started having questions with our permit writer about, and I don't have a clear answer about whether or not certain rain events allow sites to be out of compliance, especially with, you know, climate change, as we see kind of these more intense rains. At this point, it has not, the type of storm, you know, stormwater that we're seeing has not impacted how we're doing our work at this point. But the conversations are definitely being had as far as these really intense storm events and how to handle those as far as graduated compliance and graduated enforcement.
Yeah, so like, for example, that site that I saw in Chehalis, it was just, you know, it was one of the worst discharges I've ever seen. Should the owner of that site or the manager of that site should have self-reported? 100%.
And the city of Chehalis has a new inspector, so he's also learning. But he has been, I've been covering it while the position's been vacant. It used to be Morgan Mopan. I'm sure you probably worked with him. So I've been working with him closely on the sites that are having a lot of issues down there. So I'm 100% expect, and the permittees should be reporting that. If they're not, we look at that if we do go to any sort of escalated enforcement, but the city inspector is doing a really good job of letting us know when those things are happening. And when it does get really bad, we use a lot of their work to put together enforcement actions, because again, we have, you know, 400 sites. I'm writing a penalty right now for a site in Lacey that is primarily inspector inspections, because he's there every single day. And, you know, Morgan could only get there, you know, 3 times in a year. So yeah, you know, they don't always report, and actually probably more often than not, it's not self-reported. But I hope that kind of changes a little bit. I think there has been a lot of, you know, fear of ecology, I guess, reporting that sort of stuff. I guess, you know, thinking it's gonna put them on the no-no list or something, rather than us actually being able to come out and help the site get into compliance.
Did you see the ERTS photos that I sent in on that site in Chehalis?
Which one was that?
It was on Kresge Avenue.
I am not sure. The ERTS may have gotten sent to Evan.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, email that to me, or I can ask Evan what the number is and help him out with that.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have a question? I don't want to be the monopolizer here, even though I am. Okay. So Downing.
I saw that Stephen unmuted himself. Did you have a question, Stephen? Okay, I guess you didn't.
Hear me?
Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
And now I can, yes.
I kind of have a weird question, but So in Pierce County, I know that for residential areas, they establish rain gardens to allow for water table restoration and habitat restoration. I know those are for runoff and the homeowners get benefits, like if I remember right, tax exemptions because they're construction works and they are only temporary sites. Do you guys work with that kind of for building and restoration of water tables in a construction site grade, where there's benefits for establishment of like a rain garden catch basin? That's
Not really. Again, the county, our muni permit manager is a little bit, but it's really going to be more at the local level. Any sort of post-construction BMPs are really going to kind of fall in their court. Again, we're really only looking at stuff during construction. We look at protection of those sort of BMPs while they're going through the construction phase. But most of that stuff's going to be covered by the local stormwater permits and their own programs that they have.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more here. So in Grays Harbor County, we're kind of out of sight, out of mind down here.
Mhm.
And our, the planning department for Grays Harbor County isn't exactly proactive for requiring these kind of permits, which is unfortunate. So I've, in the last year or so, I think I've reported 4 or 5 kind of really serious problem sites that don't have permits. And so in most of those cases, Morgan has said, they're already halfway through construction of the site, or, they've done considerable ground disturbance. So he's not going to require them to get a permit. So I don't understand why a site can kind of get away without having a permit when they obviously are discharging, and I get a photo of it and send an ERTS in, and still they're not required to get a permit.
Yeah, I won't speak to Morgan, and I definitely don't want to throw any coworkers under the bus or anything. I will say, as far as if it was going to take if they were going to be finished within the 60-day time frame that it takes to get permit coverage, I would tell them that they absolutely cannot discharge any water, but they could finish their construction. I personally, if they're discharging and they're going to be discharging for that 60-day period, then I'd absolutely require them apply for coverage. If it's really egregious, and they, again, will be done in 2 months, we kind of have there's a lot of different, it's not black and white. It's really not. It's a permit that's supposed to be, but there's so much kind of inspector discretion that we have. But if it was just, depending on the site, if it was egregious and it was going to keep happening and they, can't get coverage within 60 days, then I would just go to some sort of enforcement action. Because again, the benefit of the permit is of that discharge and working with ecology, us knowing about it, seeing the DMR, seeing the ERTs, that they're self-reporting, hopefully in a perfect world. But if not, I would go for some sort of enforcement action if, depending on the site and how bad it is. I have had experiences in the past where ecology inspectors told very large developments that they did not need permit coverage. And, they leave ecology, and then I, come in the back end and tell them, hey, I know that ecology told you 5 years ago that you don't need to permit coverage, but you're disturbing, you're building a town. So, there's inspectors make mistakes, I will say that. But if a site is discharging and they're disturbing the ground, they 100% need to apply for coverage. And I'd 100% write them a corrections required, which isn't a fine. That just tells them that they have to do what ecology is telling them to do. And if not, then, we do go towards enforcement. And the Grays Harbor County is not covered by an MS4 permit. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure I did not see it on any of the MS4 permits.
Well, no, I don't know about that, but City of Aberdeen has a municipal stormwater discharge permit.
Okay, those, again, I don't work with them a lot. It was Morgan, I've kind of just been filling in. But when I work with counties and municipalities that are covered under that MS4 permit, it's like night and day. You mentioned being kind of out of sight, out of mind. When those programs are being audited by Ecology's MS4 permit managers, it takes a load of work off of me, because those folks are trained, understand, what's required by the MS4 permit, by the construction permit, most of the time, not always. But that MS4 permit coverage really makes a big difference in that local coverage, and us being able to do, anything just because of the amount of construction that's happening.
What exactly is an MS4 permit? I'm not.
MS4 municipal sewer stormwater system, I think. It's 4 S words. But there's a phase 1 permit. You can look at those on Ecology's website too. The phase 1 permit covers the really big areas. So like King County. I'm not super familiar, so I'm not going to quote it. But the really larger areas, and then there's a phase 2 permit that covers kind of the smaller municipalities. And within it, it requires a lot of what the CSWGP requires, even for smaller sites. So it goes through we have 13 elements of the construction stormwater permit. So all of those different things that we're looking at to ensure compliance with the permits and keep any sort of water quality issues from happening. And it goes through all of those and requires all of those things. So that then we have, city inspectors out there, with 12 sites trying to do this rather than us doing it with 400 sites, and kind of being more of the eyes and ears on the ground for us. So those programs, I talk to other inspectors that work in areas that do not have an MS4 permit, and I do not envy them. It is quite a big difference.
So what's the difference between an MS4 permit and a municipal phase 2 municipal stormwater discharge permit?
Nothing, I don't think.
So they're the same?
Well, there's a phase 1, a phase 2, and then
Okay.
So there's actually 3 of them. Right. And the differences, it goes from those, I'm not an expert on the municipal permits, but it goes from those larger areas to the smaller ones. So I'd imagine it just has, more stringent requirements in those phase 1s. And as, cities are growing, they're continuing to cover different, municipalities under those MS4 permits. And so, yeah, and it's really like a programmatic permit. So it requires them to establish, put systems in place that help get this work done, and are specifically looking at, stormwater issues, construction and post-construction.
Yeah, I think, for most practical purposes, they're the same. A municipal stormwater discharge phase 1 or phase 2 and a municipal phase 2 permit.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know the difference between the two that you're mentioning. But again, I'm no expert, but it sounds like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Jess? Thanks for the awesome conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great questions.
Given how close we are to the ocean and the high amount of salt, and given if in a construction site you are going to be upturning the soil and there's going to be a lot of salt being discharged, is there special pH regulations that need to be followed when dealing with, especially near the sea like us?
If you are working below the high water mark, it'll, again, I can't speak to it because it'll be a 401 in water work permit. But I do know, as far as the construction stormwater general permit, we haven't had any conversations on like saltwater. I guess my best recommendation would probably be to use like background readings, so testing pH before and after, and see what you're actually contributing to that. But we haven't had a lot of conversations on that, so I'm not totally sure.
I'm wondering if I can show the 4 pictures of this site in Chehalis that was like the worst one I've ever seen.
That, and I was also going to recommend, Evan is, new. He's still kind of learning. He was an inspector, like a Cecil inspector before. But if you do see any issues in, you guys' area, definitely feel free to include me as well as Evan, and I'm happy to help him and go through that. But stop sharing, and you can.
Oh, good. I just got totally blown away by this.
Yeah, let's see some good examples of bad stormwater. I think I have it set so everybody can share.
Yeah. So this is a permitted site. And it's Coal Creek is down right in front of this building right here. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can see there's like a river running through the site. And there's also a big exposed hillside here. And, it's just like, I've never seen anything like this. Quite this bad. Okay, that's the first picture.
When were these taken?
Let's see,
Was it Friday?
a couple days ago.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
if you do have the ERTS number, that's super helpful, but I can also, again, just check in with Evan.
yeah, I've got the ERTS number. Let's see. Yeah, this is a little, not quite as far. This is a little bit south, but it's the same site. So you can see, this water is just pouring off.
Based on the photos, I don't know, I'd have to look at the site and look at a map, but it certainly looks like this would already warrant at least a field penalty. So oftentimes, we try to escalate enforcement, but when it's really egregious, we'll go straight for a field penalty, which can be up to $3,000. And then if it continues being, awful, then it starts going into larger penalties.
Yeah, so this is the stuff going down the road.
I think I might have been to this site. It's just a really big stockpile that they're digging into, and there's like a wetland next on the other side.
Well, it's a hill, and I don't know what they're doing there, but it does have a permit. And
Okay, I think I might have gone to the site on a drier day, shortly after Morgan stopped. But yeah, if you want to send me information on this, I'm happy to go down there with Evan.
okay, super. I think I just have one more. Oh yeah, so most of the water is going to, this is Kresge Avenue, and most of the water was going down like right into Coal Creek, and but a little bit of it was going into the storm drain that's actually also going to Coal Creek.
Do you know if they're active, or is it just sitting there unstabilized?
I don't know. I haven't been by this, and this is the first time I really looked at sites in Chehalis, and the fact that there's a machine right there makes me think it's active. And in Paris, in the database, it shows it as active.
Okay, I think I've been here, and I think I'm having a lot of issues with sites in Chehalis that kind of thought they would just sit there throughout the winter time and didn't really do a whole lot. I think if this is a site I've been to, the reason I think they're not actually working it is because I think that equipment was sitting there when I was there like a month ago. But they again had a bunch of exposed slopes that are likely contributing to this. And I did note on my inspection report the runoff there onto the roadway and that inlet.
Right. Well, even if it's not active, they still have to control,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just a different approach to it. Oftentimes we would just kind of come on site and talk to someone if they're trying to leave it sit there all winter.
Right.
It's kind of a different approach to get them into compliance.
Right.
But yes, all of the same requirements, 100%.
Oh, I've got the permit number here. It's WAR 007145.
Does anybody else have any additional
All right,
questions?
I'll shut up now.
Thanks for showing us some great pictures of nasty stormwater, Lee.
Yes, it was a lot harder for me to find photos of good BMPs than bad ones. So probably should start keeping my eye out for the small successes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was a great talk, Jess. I really appreciate your time, and we all really appreciate your enthusiasm about stormwater, and completely appreciate that you took the time again to talk with us and chat with us and answer our questions. So very appreciative, and I'm thankful for all the people that could join us this evening. I hope you learned something, and if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me at graysharborstreamteam@gmail.com, or reaching out to Jess at her email. So feel free to reach out if you need any additional information. We'd love to hear from you. So
Yes,
thanks again.
and thank you, Jess. It was fun having someone that knows so much answer all my questions, and I'm glad that Alexa is cutting us off, because I have an obsession with stormwater and I could keep going for hours here.
Well, I try, and I'm a stormwater nerd as well, so feel free to call and we can chat.
Thanks.
Thanks again. You guys have a great evening.
You too. Bye, Alexa. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.